Naima was walking barefoot through a vast, sprawling green field. Her delicate feet carried her slowly over the soft, dewy grass, as if every step were guided by some unseen magnetic charm. It was as though a small child released into a garden filled with fluttering butterflies is irresistibly drawn after each delicate creature. In that expansive field, there were many lush, green trees, interspersed with flowering shrubs and climbing vines. Some of the trees were of the kind whose branches spread out in every direction, fine, graceful, and identical in appearance, while others had branches that reached out as if to embrace the beauty descending from the heavens, as though they wished to enfold a loveliness that had alighted from the sky in their welcoming arms. Or perhaps they stretched out their limbs like a person awaiting the fulfillment of a heartfelt prayer. Naima thought to herself, "How long has this tree kept its branches outstretched? I wonder if it is gathering its acceptance or merely waiting in anticipation." With wide, astonished eyes, she surveyed every plant and tree around her, as if she had stepped not into the human world, but into a realm of nature, where each tree seemed to address her directly. As she continued walking, deep in reverie, she suddenly noticed that all the plants and trees had vanished. In their place lay an empty field devoid of any greenery. In a sudden burst of panic, she halted. With trembling hands, she reached over to the bedside table and switched on the lamp. A gentle, ambient light began to fill the room. Hastily, she poured water into a glass from the jug and drank it, though it took many moments for her mind to catch up with reality. Even then, mentally, she found herself back in that enormous field. Her mind refused to accept that the scene had been nothing but a dream, a figment, perhaps, born of the restless anxieties that had plagued her for days. Maybe this vision was just one more fragment of the ceaseless worries that had haunted her thoughts. She glanced at the clock and saw that it was still before dawn, though her hair was disheveled in its right side curl, and she could see that the early morning was far off. Gathering her hair with tender care, she propped herself up on the headboard of her bed and sat in quiet contemplation. A great deal of time passed as she pondered the dream, a breathtaking scene that had turned out to be as insubstantial as a mirage. What could it possibly portend for her life? The very thought of it had already entwined her destiny with that elusive vision. As the early morning calls of the Adhan began to echo, she resolved to perform her far prayer. After praying, she set an alarm to wake for the morning and drifted back to sleep. The next morning, barely managing to rouse herself at the last minute, Naima hurriedly prepared to leave for the clinic. She embraced her mother, who chided her gently. "Now, have your breakfast. How will you deal with everyone's problems on an empty stomach?" With that, Naima gulped down her glass of milkshake and stepped outside, determined to reach the clinic. As soon as she sat in the car, she checked her phone. As usual, there were no new notifications. Naima was a psychologist who helped people untangle their emotional dilemmas. Solving the intricacies of the human mind was never an easy task. When we humans become entangled in confusion, it might be a single word spoken by someone, a particular behavior, or a solitary action that can keep our minds tormented for months or even years. We become ensnared in this misery that the one who inflicts it may not even remember. Yet we endlessly rehash that one point, causing ourselves fresh pain every time we recall it. No one should ever allow another to steal away the tranquility of their mind with careless words. Psychological issues, after all, depend largely on the circumstances of one's life. When you're already at your wit's end and life continues to demand more from you without any sturdy support beside you, it is very likely that you will eventually collapse from exhaustion. Naima remembered that she herself was a traveler on a long journey, sometimes feeling as if she were about to fall from sheer weariness. On her way back from the clinic, as she sat quietly in the car, her eyes caught sight of a scene. Daniel Ibrahim was seated in his car with a girl, deeply engrossed in conversation. In that very moment, it seemed as if everything in her mind hesitated to process either joy or sorrow at once. For a fleeting moment, it was as though her mind took a long time to decide whether to feel happy or sad. Naima Said also noticed that suddenly her eyes had grown moist, and her face appeared to have taken on a slightly drooping expression, a subtle sign that an intense feeling was surfacing. For an instant, an inner sensation, as delicate as a blooming emotion, seemed to manifest on her face. Daniel Ibrahim was, in fact, the son of Na'ima's maternal uncle, a man who had been residing in London for the sake of education and had settled there permanently after completing his studies. He had always been his uncle's apple of the eye. He loved him even more than his own father. When, 5 years earlier, his father had suddenly passed away due to a heart attack, responsibility for Na'ima's household had fallen upon her uncle, for her father and her uncle had once been business partners. Na'ima's elder brother was married and living with his wife in Australia for the past year. "Father, what are you saying? Marriage is no trivial game," her father had remarked in exasperation. "How can you suddenly decide on such a huge matter? You know well that it is not a spur-of-the-moment decision. I have always kept you mentally informed about how dear Na'ima is to me. I am arranging this marriage, and my opinion should count as much as yours, even if you have no emotional attachment to her. How can we live together all of a sudden?" With his hands clasped in prayer, he continued, "My dear child, when two kind souls come together sincerely, attachment, honesty, and love naturally flourish." "No, absolutely not, Father," Nima had thought bitterly. "I had no inkling that my own marriage would be arranged by force, a union I have always despised. I feel a deep sorrow when I think of such unions. I have witnessed many such people around me. I have seen them suffer through years of hypocrisy, deceiving one another without any genuine emotional understanding or attachment." In a tone laden with resignation, her father had then added, "Son, marriage is like a calculation now. We have begun to understand it as if it were an equation. There is no logical explanation that fits every situation. Look at yourselves. Both of you are my own children, and yet you have come to the point of choosing partners based on a flawed criterion. You both are not hypocrites. However, my decision is final. Consider me the father you wish, but you must go ahead with the marriage nonetheless." With that stern declaration, her father had walked out. Daniel, with a quiet, helpless gaze, watched his father depart. He had always believed that a child should have the freedom to decide for themselves, to follow their happiness without having a predetermined fate thrust upon them. Yet, once the parents impose their decision on their children, they grant them an independence for the rest of their lives, a freedom that comes with an irrevocable price. How can a child ever be rebellious when their parents dictate every aspect of their life? He mused. Silently. There are, he thought, only 3 kinds of children in the world: those who are obedient by nature and never rebel, those who eventually rebel against their parents, and those who never know how to rebel at all. Daniel quietly grabbed his jacket and stepped out of the car. He knew all too well that his father was a man who never wavered from his decisions. His mother might have been able to change a few things, but he was aware that everyone in the adjoining room was listening attentively, ready to support her if needed. However, his parents had already held a meeting on the matter before, and nothing could be changed now. It was all over. Daniel understood that he had to accept the arranged marriage, for if he did not, his home would remain a place of perpetual discord, a reality that troubled him deeply, much like many other children forced into unwanted situations by their loving yet domineering parents. That evening, as the sun began to set and the cool twilight deepened, Daniel found himself alone by the seaside. He contemplated many things, deep thoughts that were both meaningful and, at times, utterly trivial. We often find ourselves unable to articulate the most profound feelings, even though they lie deep within us. Sometimes, we only wish to think about them rather than speak them aloud. Today, however, Daniel's thoughts were interrupted by the memory of Nima. He recalled how, for days, her absence had tormented him. Now that she had returned from the clinic, he wondered if she might be willing to express her true feelings. Naima, for her part, had always been a strong yet fragile soul, maintained by the inner strength instilled in her by her father. She often believed that perhaps Daniel would take care of her, at least for that day. But even this thought was laden with sorrow and a sense of incompleteness. In her heart, she knew that not everyone is destined to find peace and love. While many yearn for marriage, not everyone gets the chance to live it fully. Love is indeed a precious blessing and a divine gift, yet often lies hidden within each heart, waiting to be awakened. For a couple of days, Daniel remained away from home under the guise of visiting friends, but on the third day, he finally returned. He showed his return ticket, announcing that he would be back the next morning and that he would travel around for a year afterward. This news, however, pained Naima deeply. After pacing around in her room for a long time, she finally decided that if Daniel was unwilling to speak to her, then perhaps she must initiate the conversation. After all, the two were intimately connected. After 3 long days, it was clear that Daniel was not yet ready to embrace his destiny. Regardless, a decision had been made for her already, and she resolved to confront him about it. Her uncle's house, where she lived, was divided into 2 portions. The upper part belonged to her father, and the lower part was where her elder uncle resided. Descending the stairs, she saw her uncle waiting. With a warm embrace, he said, "Daniel, where are you?" Naima, with a trembling voice, requested, "Please send him to the terrace upstairs. I need to talk to him." At that moment, Daniel himself appeared, but Naima quickly ascended. Her pride had suffered greatly. 3 days had passed without any meaningful words from her husband, and now he was returning without even uttering a single comforting phrase. Her heart was heavy with the pain of being disregarded. It felt as though every heart, once wounded, would forever remain in agony. No matter what, every person must eventually chart their own course in life, be it arduous or comfortable. This was, after all, a matter of fate. For Daniel, it was unexpected that Naima herself would come down to speak with him. He had always prided himself on his decisiveness. Yet today, he felt that perhaps he was nearing his breaking point. In his mind, he had resolved that after marriage he would simply return to London, where the frenetic pace of life would quickly swallow him up. Still, he thought that maybe this delay would give Naima enough time to adjust to him. On the other hand, Naima, too, was under pressure. Mentally, she had been prepared by Daniel's family for years to accept him, though she had never truly embraced the idea. Other potential suitors had come and gone, but none had ever seemed as acceptable as Daniel. After all, he was her cousin, her uncle's son, and the notion of this union was comforting in its familiarity. His appearance was refined, and it was as if every aspect of his being matched a girl's dreams. Both families had willingly given their consent for the marriage. On the day of the wedding, Naima wore a light sky blue camise paired with a flowing sharara, her hands adorned with a garland of roses, her makeup subtle and delicate, and she accessorized with finely wrought jewelry that emphasized her fragile beauty. Yet throughout the day, on her wedding day, she could not help but be reminded of her father's disapproval. Tears came to her eyes for no apparent reason, and she wept quietly as she signed the marriage documents. Meanwhile, Daniel's heart was strangely void of any outward emotion. Perhaps he was deliberately concealing his feelings, but one thing was common to both. They both fervently prayed for the ease and happiness of their future life together. It was as if destiny itself had conspired to bestow upon them the blessings of a smooth and peaceful existence. For him, it all seemed like a game in which fate provided everything without demanding that one even ask for it. During the function, neither of them exchanged more than a few perfunctory words. Not one compliment, not even a hint of reassurance was shared. After the elders had taken their seats, both retreated to their respective rooms. Naima's heart brimmed with dreams, a mosaic of hopes and desires that now seemed more delicate than ever. Emotionally fragile due to her father's absence, she clung to the thought that perhaps Daniel would care for her, at least for that day. Yet such thoughts brought with them a searing pain. Where her husband's face appeared before her once again, it reminded her of all that she had suffered to preserve her dignity and the lengths to which she had gone to hide from the scrutiny of the world. Over the following days, Daniel would occasionally come to see her, sometimes under the guise of meeting with his own family. But whenever they were alone, there was an unspoken tension, a barrier that neither could seem to breach. At times, during video calls with her aunt and uncle, Naima would receive a call out of the blue, with Danielle's voice urging, "Talk to me, Naima, how are you?" Yet his tone was always so neutral, so devoid of genuine warmth, that she felt an aching emptiness in response. It was as if he had forgotten how to truly speak about his feelings. Even when he tried to crack a joke or lighten the mood, there was an underlying rigidity that kept his emotions at bay. One evening, while sitting quietly in the lounge with her mother, Noima's thoughts wandered to the various hardships and dreams that had led her to this moment. Her mother had always told her that life was unpredictable, that one must sometimes surrender to fate and trust in divine providence. Marriage is not merely a union of two individuals, her mother would say. It is the weaving together of destinies, a tapestry of love, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment. Naima had clung to these words in the silent hours of the night, praying that somehow the relentless burdens of her heart might one day be lifted. In the meantime, Daniel found himself haunted by a recurring thought that no matter what happened, the sanctuary of home was slipping further away from him. One day, while he was in the car on his way back from an errand, he overheard a conversation on the radio about the significance of perseverance and hope in times of adversity. Those words struck him deeply, and he began to wonder if he had been too harsh in his silence with Naima. Did his unwillingness to express even the simplest sentiment contribute to the growing distance between them? The thought made his heart ache, and he silently vowed to himself that he would try, however difficult it might be, to bridge that gap. Days turned into weeks, and the relentless pace of daily life continued unabated. Naima busied herself with her work at the clinic, determined to submerge her personal sorrows in the noble pursuit of healing others. She meticulously attended to each patient's psychological troubles, listening to their woes with empathy and offering them words of comfort. Yet even as she soothed the minds of others, she found herself increasingly tormented by the unresolved pain of her own existence. In moments of quiet solitude, she would reflect on the profound irony of it all, that she, who had dedicated herself to the art of mending broken hearts, could not seem to heal her own. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Naima found herself alone in her modest room, the only sound being the soft hum of the ceiling fan overhead. As she sat by the window, gazing out at the darkening sky, memories of her earlier dream in the empty field returned to her. That vivid vision of the barren landscape, a stark contrast to the lush greenery she had witnessed in her mind, seemed to symbolize the emptiness she felt within her soul. With a heavy heart, she whispered to herself, "Must I always live with this uncertainty? Can I never truly find solace in the embrace of love?" Her thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a knock on the door. It was her mother, coming to check on her with gentle concern. "My dear," her mother said softly, "I know that you are troubled, but remember that every storm eventually passes. Trust in God's plan for you. Sometimes, even when life seems bleak, there's a hidden blessing waiting to emerge." Naima managed a weak smile in response. Her mother's words, though intended to comfort her, only deepened the introspection within her. For in her heart, she had always yearned for a love that was unconditional, a love that would mend the broken pieces of her soul and fill the emptiness that now seemed so pervasive. Meanwhile, Daniel continued his own inner battle. He recalled the times when, as a child, he had felt unburdened and carefree, moments when the world seemed full of possibility and hope. Now, as he navigated the complexities of adulthood and an arranged marriage, those memories felt distant and faint. Yet, deep within him, there still burned a quiet desire to truly understand Naima, to learn the secret language of her heart and share his own in return. Every time he attempted to reach out to her, however, he was met with a silence that was as profound as it was painful. One crisp autumn afternoon, Daniel decided that enough was enough. He resolved to break the cycle of silence that had come to define their relationship. He invited Naima for a quiet meal at a small outdoor cafe, a modest establishment known for its relaxed atmosphere and delectable cuisine. As they sat together at a table on the corner of the cafe's patio, Daniel cleared his throat and spoke in a tone that was gentle yet determined. Naima, he began, I know that for a long time I have failed to express what is in my heart. I have been silent, and in that silence, I fear I have hurt you. Please let us talk openly. I want to understand your dreams, your fears, everything that makes you who you are. Naima looked at him for a long moment, her eyes reflecting a mix of sorrow and tentative hope. Danielle, she replied softly, I too have been lost in my thoughts. Sometimes I feel as if I am wandering in a desert of emotions, unable to find a source of water to quench my thirst for love and understanding. I have always believed that our union was arranged by fate, but fate has not yet granted me the warmth I need. I need to know that you truly care. Their conversation meandered slowly from tentative words to a heartfelt dialogue in which both revealed their innermost feelings. They spoke about the pressures imposed upon them by their families, the silent expectations that had weighed heavily on their hearts, and the unspoken promises that now seemed to hang in the balance. Daniel admitted that he had been tormented by his inability to articulate his emotions, while Naima confessed that the constant reminder of her arranged marriage had filled her with a sense of isolation and despair. For the first time since their marriage had been decreed, they began to see each other as individuals, with hopes, dreams, and vulnerabilities that deserve compassion and understanding. As the afternoon faded into evening, their conversation took on a gentle cadence, punctuated by moments of quiet reflection and shared laughter. Naima found herself slowly letting her guard down, while Daniel's once stoic demeanor softened with every sincere word that he uttered. The barriers that had long separated them began to crumble, replaced by an emerging bond forged through honest communication. It was in that humble outdoor cafe, under the fading light of day, that both realized that perhaps the key to their future happiness lay not in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in the simple act of listening to one another. Over the next several days, as the memories of that intimate conversation lingered, Danielle and Naima made small but significant efforts to bridge the gap that had once seemed insurmountable. Danielle would send Naima short messages throughout the day, often quoting lines from poetry that spoke of hope and renewal. Naima, in turn, began to share her thoughts more openly, even if only in brief sentences that carried the weight of her feelings. There were moments when silence still fell between them, but now that silence was different. It was no longer the cold, oppressive quiet of neglect, but rather a reflective pause that allowed them to gather their thoughts and draw strength from the mutual understanding that had begun to blossom. Yet even as this tentative connection grew, both knew that challenges still lay ahead. Naima's inner turmoil and the scars left by years of forced compliance with others' decisions were not easily erased. She sometimes found herself overwhelmed by the thought of the arranged marriage, a union that had been imposed on her without any chance to choose her own path. Daniel, too, wrestled with his sense of duty versus his longing for genuine emotional connection. The lingering memories of his own childhood, when he had once known freedom and lightness of heart, haunted him in quiet moments of introspection. In those instances, he would close his eyes and imagine a life where love was a choice rather than an obligation. A life where he could share everything with the one he loved without fear of judgment or regret. As days turned into weeks, the couple gradually began to rebuild their relationship on the foundation of honest conversation and mutual respect. They both acknowledged that the path ahead would not be free of obstacles, yet they resolved to face those challenges together. Daniel promised himself that he would no longer allow external pressures to dictate the terms of their relationship. Likewise, Naima vowed that she would no longer let her past dictate her future. With every small step they took, the emotional distance between them diminished, replaced by a growing sense of unity and the promise of a shared destiny. One clear night, as a gentle breeze rustled the leaves outside and the stars shimmered like scattered diamonds across the sky, Naima and Danielle found themselves sitting on the terrace of their home. Wrapped in quiet silence and the cool comfort of the night, they gazed up at the vast expanse above them. In that moment, Naima spoke softly. "Danielle, I have often wondered if our fates were written in the stars. I have felt so alone in this journey, burdened by the decisions made for me by others. Yet tonight, I feel that perhaps there is still hope, that together we can chart a new course for our lives." Danielle reached out and took her hand in his. "Naima," he said, his voice steady and sincere, "I have been afraid for so long, afraid to express my true feelings, afraid of what others might think. But I have come to understand that true strength lies in vulnerability. I don't want to live a life dictated by duty alone. I want our lives to be filled with meaning, with love that is chosen freely and nurtured with care. I promise you, from this day forward, I will do everything in my power to ensure that our future is built on mutual respect and understanding." At that moment, the two of them sat in profound silence, feeling the weight of their words and the sincerity in their hearts. The cool night air, the distant sound of traffic, and the soft murmur of their shared breaths all became part of a quiet symphony, a prelude to the life they hoped to create together. In that silence, both Naima and Danielle felt a healing that had eluded them for so long. The old wounds of past impositions and neglect began to fade, replaced by a cautious optimism that perhaps, after all, fate had given them a second chance. In the weeks that followed, as the new rhythm of their relationship gradually took shape, both began to make plans for a future that was truly their own. Naima returned to her work at the clinic with renewed vigor, her eyes now carrying a spark of determination that had been absent before. Danielle, too, found solace in dedicating himself to his responsibilities, but he always made time to share even the smallest moments with Naima. A shared cup of tea in the early morning, a quiet conversation under the fading light of dusk, or simply a knowing glance that said more than words ever could. Their families, once strict adherents to age-old customs, began to notice the change in the couple. The tension that had once clouded every interaction was slowly dissipating, replaced by a sense of cautious happiness. Although there were still moments of uncertainty, moments when old habits threatened to resurface, the love that had been nurtured in secret conversations and quiet understandings proved to be a potent antidote to the bitterness of the past. Time, as it always does, marched on relentlessly. Seasons changed, and with them, the landscape of their lives transformed. The initial awkwardness and mutual apprehension gave way to a shared routine and a deepening bond. Together, they discovered the simple pleasures of everyday life, the comfort of a warm home, the joy of cooking a meal together, and the quiet satisfaction of having someone to lean on during life's inevitable hardships. In the midst of these changes, there came a day when Danielle and Naima were invited to a family gathering, a celebration that brought together relatives from far and wide. The event was an elaborate affair, filled with laughter, music, and the aroma of sumptuous food. At first, both felt the weight of old expectations and the memories of past misunderstandings. Yet, as the evening progressed, Danielle's gentle humor and Naima's quiet grace began to win over even the most skeptical relatives. In a rare moment of levity, one elderly family member remarked, "You two are like a perfect blend of spice and sweetness, a true recipe for happiness." Laughter spread through the room, and for a brief moment, the specter of the past seemed to vanish. That night, as the festivities wound down and the guests began to leave, Danielle and Naima found themselves alone on the terrace once again. The air was cool, and the quiet murmur of the night provided a gentle backdrop to their reflections. "I never imagined," Naima confessed softly, "that such a day would come when we could all celebrate our union without bitterness or regret." Danielle squeezed her hand reassuringly. "I know," he replied. "We have endured many trials, but every moment has led us here. I believe that our love, despite its troubled beginnings, will only grow stronger as we continue on this path together." In the following months, Both began to make plans for a future that was uniquely theirs. They discussed dreams of travel, the possibility of further education, and even small plans to start a family. A future that would be built not on forced decisions, but on shared aspirations and mutual compromise. Each plan, no matter how small, was a step toward reclaiming a life that had once felt dictated by fate alone. There were times when the old shadows of doubt would creep in. The memory of that surreal dream in the empty field, the bitterness of an arranged marriage, and the lingering hurt of unspoken words. Yet, each time, Danielle and Naima found strength in each other. Their relationship, once a battleground of silent resentments, slowly evolved into a sanctuary where both could freely express their fears and hopes without judgment. In these vulnerable moments, they learned that true love is not the absence of pain, but the courage to face it together. One particularly rainy evening, when the world outside was cloaked in a mist of melancholy, Naima sat by the window with a cup of tea. The rhythmic patter of raindrops on the roof provided a soothing cadence to her thoughts. "Sometimes," she whispered, "I wonder if I will ever be truly free from the burdens of my past. Will I always carry this weight on my heart?" Danielle, who had joined her quietly, rested his head on her shoulder. "I do not have all the answers," he murmured, "but I promise that I will always be here to help carry the load. We may never be completely free of our past, but together we can learn to embrace it and let it guide us rather than bind us." As time went on, their love continued to mature like a fine wine, a slow, deliberate process of healing, understanding, and growth. They began to openly discuss their fears, their disappointments, and their dreams, transforming every shared silence into an opportunity for connection. In their newfound openness, they discovered that the most profound intimacy often arises from the willingness to reveal one's deepest vulnerabilities. And in doing so, they found not only solace, but also a renewed sense of purpose. Their journey was not without setbacks, of course. There were days when the memories of enforced decisions and unspoken resentments would surge forth, threatening to undo all the progress they had made. On such days, Naima would retreat into herself, and Danielle would patiently wait, offering gentle words and silent support. "We are still learning," he would say, "and every day is a new chance to rebuild what was once broken." And slowly, the walls they had built around their hearts began to crumble, replaced by a fragile yet undeniable hope that one day their love would stand as a testament to the power of resilience and mutual forgiveness. Then came the day when, after a long period of introspection and tentative reconciliation, Danielle decided that he must speak his heart completely. Over a quiet dinner at home, with the soft glow of a single lamp illuminating the room, he reached for Naima's hand and said, "Naima, I have made many mistakes in my silence. I realize now that by withholding my feelings, I have not only hurt you, but also deprived us of the opportunity to grow closer. I want you to know that I am ready to listen, to truly listen, and to share everything with you, no matter how painful it might be. I want us to build a future where both our voices are heard." Naima's eyes filled with tears as she looked at him, and for the first time in a long while, she felt that maybe her fate was not entirely sealed by the past. "I, too, have been afraid," she admitted softly. "Afraid of losing myself, of being overwhelmed by the expectations of others. But I am ready now, ready to embrace the love that we have, to let go of the bitterness of forced decisions, and to step forward together." That night, as they sat side by side on the terrace watching the stars emerge one by one, they vowed to cherish every moment that lay ahead. They pledged to confront their challenges head on, to be honest with each other, and above all, to never let silence rob them of the chance to truly be together. Their promise was simple yet profound, a commitment to mutual understanding, to nurturing the delicate balance between independence and intimacy. In the weeks that followed, their renewed bond became apparent to everyone around them. Family gatherings, once marked by awkward silences and forced pleasantries, now resonated with genuine warmth and light-hearted banter. Even the elders, who had once adhered so rigidly to tradition, began to soften their stance as they witnessed the subtle transformation in both Naima and Danielle. Their love, nurtured in the crucible of hardship and misunderstanding, was finally blossoming into something real and beautiful. Despite the lingering remnants of past pain, the couple embarked on a new chapter filled with promise. They made plans for small trips, shared dreams of a home of their own, and even discussed the possibility of welcoming children into their lives, a future that was no longer imposed by external pressures, but chosen by both their hearts. Every shared smile, every tear, every quiet moment of mutual understanding became a stepping stone toward a life defined not by obligation, but by genuine connection. Years passed, and as the seasons changed, so did the contours of their lives. Danielle and Naima grew together, not as individuals forced into a predetermined destiny, but as partners who had forged their own path through love, struggle, and perseverance. They learned that even in a world filled with uncertainties, the strength of their bond could create a sanctuary of hope and resilience. Looking back on that long and winding journey, Naima often recalled the early days of her life when she had wandered barefoot in a vast field, lost in dreams that blurred the line between reality and illusion. She remembered how the empty field had once symbolized her fears and uncertainties. Now, however, that same field had transformed in her memory into a metaphor for possibility, the endless horizon of a future that was waiting to be shaped by her own hands. Danielle, too, had come to understand that his past mistakes, his moments of silence, had been necessary steps toward learning the true meaning of love. It was through his struggles that he discovered the power of vulnerability, the realization that letting go of pride and embracing one's deepest emotions was the only way to mend a broken heart. Together, they faced life's challenges with a quiet determination. Whether it was a difficult day at the clinic, the relentless pressures of work, or the subtle, persistent ache of past regrets, they found that their love was a steady beacon amid the storms. It was a love that had been nurtured by patience, sacrifice, and a willingness to forgive, both each other and themselves. And so, on that fateful night when the stars shone brightly over the terrace and the cool breeze whispered promises of a new dawn, Danielle and Naima embraced their future with a shared resolve. They knew that the road ahead would not be without its twists and turns, but they also knew that as long as they walked it together, there was no challenge too great to overcome. Their story, which began with uncertainty and the cold imposition of fate, had finally found its own voice, a voice that spoke of hope, renewal, and the simple truth that love, when nurtured with care and understanding, can indeed heal the deepest of wounds. In that quiet, starry night, with hearts laid bare and souls intertwined, they discovered that the promise of tomorrow was not something to be feared, but rather something to be celebrated. For in the end, Danielle and Naima learned that true fulfillment was not measured by the circumstances into which they were born, but by the courage they found to create their own destiny. A destiny built on trust, open communication, and the enduring belief that even the most complicated of hearts can find solace in the gentle embrace of love.